Certainly that would not be one of those boundaries, but there are certain things that even people with no religion would find offensive. If I was to come on TV and start insulting, you know, I mean, I hate to be crass, but your mother, that would be extremely offensive. Now, we feel as strongly about our mothers as we do about the Prophet Muhammad. That doesn't mean you can't discuss what he says, the message he brings,
people in this country
but there's no need to be crass about it.
Walking down the street, you get offended. There's somebody wearing something you don't like, or you
absolutely, and we get
offended. It's part of being grown up. It's just accepting the fact that you get your feelings trodden upon. Does it mean you have to deliberately tread on people's feelings? No, not necessarily.
Exactly.
But what you cannot do is to ring fence one ideology through fear, intimidation, or anything else. And that is what we see happening. That's what Ben Ellsworth's saying.
Professor. Salman Rushdie simply wrote a book. That's what he did. He wrote a book. He was threatened with death. He was threatened with death by baying crowds in this country. People burned his books. They demanded the death penalty.
And some leading parliamentarians suggested that the paperback shouldn't come.
The debate between Douglas Murray and Miriam Francois never ceased to be heated. In this debate, it can be clearly seen how female Muslim activists tried to suppress Douglas Murray's free speech. She claims that we should not offend religious sensibilities, but the truth about Islam is offensive. The principle of freedom of expression holds that individuals should have the right to express their views, even if those views are controversial or offensive to some. Attempts to silence Muslim women's Murray could be seen as an infringement of this fundamental right.
Miriam, you wanted to come back in.
Well, I mean, I was going to say, there are certainly things that are offensive, but do we need to offend people by saying them? I mean, there's a way of saying things. We can discuss the institution of the monarchy in this country without insulting the Queen. It therefore makes it perfectly reasonable and possible to discuss, I think, the tenets and beliefs of any other religion without insulting sensibilities.
So insulting sensibilities, that's interesting. Without insulting sensibilities, okay. Some Muslims think that music and dancing are haram and should be forgiven, not forgiven, wrong word, Freudian slip, forbidden, haram, that it's forbidden. So if I were to say, music, forbidden, haram, that is just bonkers. Now some people are going to find that extremely offensive, aren't they? Have I offended sensibilities? Do I have the right to say that?
I think if people that are used to having debates within the interfaith debates are pretty familiar with the codes and practices of different religions and understand where those boundaries lie. And certainly that would not be one of those boundaries. But there are certain things that even people with no religion would find offensive. If I was to come on TV and start insulting, you know, I mean, I hate to be crass, but your mother, that would be extremely offensive. Now, we feel as strongly about our mothers as we do about the Prophet Muhammad. That doesn't mean you can't discuss what he says, the message he brings,
people in this country
but there's no need to be crass about it.
Walking down the street, you get offended. There's somebody wearing something you don't like, or you
absolutely, and we get offended.
It's part of being grown up. It's just accepting the fact that you get your feelings trodden upon. Does it mean you have to deliberately tread on people's feelings? No, not necessarily.
Exactly.
But what you cannot do is to ring fence one ideology through fear, intimidation, or anything else. And that is what we see happening. That's what Ben Ellsworth's saying.
Efforts by female Muslim activists to silence Douglas Murray may not be successful, as they often appear quite helpless before his arguments. Islam, like any great religion, includes many different interpretations and practices. There are more than 1 billion Muslims worldwide, and their views on free speech can vary significantly based on cultural, political, and theological factors. In many countries, restrictions on freedom of expression are more often linked to authoritarian regimes than to Islam itself. These regimes can use religion as a tool to maintain control and limit freedoms to suppress dissent. There are ongoing debates within the Muslim community about the interpretation of religious texts and the need for reform. Many Muslim scholars and activists support freedom of expression and criticize oppressive practices. High-profile incidents, such as reactions to blasphemy or criticism of Islam, often highlight tensions between freedom of expression and religious sensitivities. These incidents can sometimes reinforce stereotypes and contribute to polarized views of Islam.
Obviously, I mean, a lot of people have taken offense at some of the things that you've written. You know, they feel personally offended because they feel that their faith, which is so dear to them, and their belief, which they cherish, you're criticizing it. Do you think about that?
I don't go out of my way to offend.
No, but do you think about the possible consequences?
If people are offended, then they may argue against me. All I use is words. There's a radical distinction between using words and violence and incitement to violence. the Salman Rushdie affair brings this out. Salman Rushdie simply wrote a book. That's what he did. He wrote a book. He was threatened with death. He was threatened with death by baying crowds in this country. People burned his books. They demanded the death penalty.
And some leading parliamentarians suggested that the paperback shouldn't come out.
Some leading parliamentarians, some leading clergymen, some leading bishops sided with the Ayatollah Khomeini rather than sided with this very distinguished novelist who did no more than put words on paper. That is a radical distinction.
Salman Rushdie wrote a book and received death threats from a mob, with some parliamentarians and clerics siding with the Ayatollah instead of supporting him. The true face of Islam has been revealed as many people have called for a hunt for Salman Rushdie's head. This is perhaps the most prominent example of the conflict between free speech and religious sensitivities, especially in relation to Islam. The novel includes a fictional account of the life of the Prophet Muhammad, which many Muslims find deeply offensive and blasphemous, especially when this barbarism was supported by a number of parliamentarians and clerics in many countries who supported Khomeini's call, arguing that Rushdie had insulted Islam and deserved to be punished. Their support highlights deep religious and cultural divisions over issues of free speech and blasphemy.
I do sort of feel like we're talking about issues in a vacuum here. I mean, you're talking about the fatwa against Salman Rushdie. Are we forgetting that we're talking about Khomeini? Are we forgetting that we're talking about the 1979 revolution and the context in which that was occurring? And similarly, when we talk about, you know, the reaction, the highly unacceptable, violent reaction of some Muslims, I would like to add, to films like Geert Wilders' films and Van Gogh's film, etc. You know, we're almost talking like it's completely decontextualized. It's not happening in a vacuum. Muslims around the world feel victimized.
It is ironic that Islamist activism tries to downplay the Salman Rushdie controversy by deflecting and distracting from the context of Muslim victimhood. It seemed like she was just like some congressman or cleric. Many leaders and public figures in the West have defended Rushdie's right to freedom of expression. They argue that, regardless of content, issuing death threats against a book is an unacceptable attack on free speech and individual rights. The Rushdie case highlights the tension between protecting freedom of speech and respecting religious beliefs. In many Western countries, freedom of expression is a fundamental right, while in some Muslim-majority countries, blasphemy is considered a serious offense. Muslim woman tries to mislead us that this is just a misunderstanding. She wants everyone to believe that Muslims are the real victims. Meanwhile, Rushdie's life was severely affected by the fatwa, having to live under constant threat. Additionally, translators and publishers associated with the book were attacked, demonstrating the global reach and impact of the fatwa.
One of the people who supported the fatwa against Salman Rushdie was now Sir Iqbal Sakrani, a leader of the Muslim Council of Britain. He got a knighthood after saying that death was too good for Salman Rushdie. And he's a leader. He was a leader of the Muslim Council of Britain.
Perhaps Douglas Murray does not need to speak up again when other commentators have made enough arguments to address female Muslim activists. In some countries, blasphemy laws restrict speech considered offensive to religious feelings. Critics say such laws can be used to suppress dissent and silence minority voices. Let's stand up and build good rights for all, instead of suppressing speech. Encouraging open and respectful dialogue can help address concerns while maintaining freedom of expression. Many Muslims around the world engage in civil debate and advocate for freedom of expression, trying to reconcile their faith with modern democratic values. Ensuring that legal protections for free speech are balanced with protections against hate speech can help maintain harmony in diverse societies. While it is essential to address issues related to freedom of expression, it is equally important to avoid generalizations and recognize the efforts of those in the Muslim community who are working towards positive change.
So my take on this is that you can't actually offend people. People can be offended by you. And that's their problem, not yours. If you don't want to hear your God being mocked, go live in a country where you don't hear it. Being offended is a personal choice. Yes, I know Muslims have the right to be offended, as all people do, but do not have the right to act upon those who offended them. I agree with Douglas Murray. Okay. People find music and dancing offensive, then they have come to the wrong country, because this is a massive part of our culture. Like, that's their culture. You can't come to someone else's country and be dictating for them what they should do and what they should not do. Okay, if you're not comfortable with that, I think you should just go to any country that is comfortable with doing that. Okay, so lovelies, this will bring us to the end of this video. If you have any opinion, anything you want to comment about, anything at all you want to comment, please leave it in the comment section. Okay, let me know your opinion concerning this video. And if you watch up until this moment, please don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to give the video a thumbs up, and turn on your post notification for more video. Thank you so much, I really appreciate.